Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll call to order the April 5th, 2023 meeting of the Council of City of Springdale. I would ask that you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. McNear, you do roll call.
Mr. Anderson?
Present.
Mrs. Gantos? Here. Mr. Hawkins?
Present.
Mr. Jacobs?
Present.
Mr. Ramirez?
Present.
Mrs. Sullivan-Weiscup?
Present.
Mr. Vanover?
Present. Council, first thing this evening, we have the minutes from our March 15th meeting. If there are any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion second, discussion. All right. All those approving the minutes as published signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are approved with 7 affirmative votes. All right, Ms. McNear, are there any communications this evening?
Nothing this evening, Mr. President. Thank you.
Okay. Well, at this point, we'll open the floor for communications from the audience. Is there anybody in the audience like to address council for any reason? Second call. Third and final call. We'll close communications from the audience. First off, in our ordinances this evening,
Mr.
we
President,
have Mayor Webster. Sure.
Yes. I have a proclamation I'd like to read tonight, if you don't
Sure.
mind.
Go ahead.
Mr. Clayton, would you step forward here? He's accommodating me because I can't walk down the steps. I hope you guys appreciate that. So this is National Public Health Week, and as we always do, we honor our local health department with a proclamation, and that's what I'm about to do now. So, whereas started in 1985, National Public Health Week takes place each year during the first week of April to recognize the important contributions public health has made to our nation. National Public Health Week also highlights issues that are important to creating a healthy future. And whereas Springdale Public Health Department works to prevent disease and promote good health within the city of Springdale, Ohio, and whereas since 1974, the Springdale Health Department has created and supported a strong public health system that engages residents and community partners to foster a healthier community. And whereas a hallmark of the city of Springdale's health department is extensive cooperation among the wide range of public and private sector partners. And whereas this year's theme, the National Public Health Week 2023, is centering and celebrating cultures in health. And whereas in April, the nation celebrates National Public Health Week to recognize the important role that public health departments play in sustaining and improving community health to create a brighter future. And whereas the Springdale Health Department is committed to ensuring that Springdale families are healthy and in cooperative efforts with individuals, families, community partners, and policymakers will promote good health and among future Springdale generations. Therefore, I, Doyle H. Webster, Mayor of the City of Springdale, do hereby proclaim April 3rd through April 9th National Public Health Week in the City of Springdale and commend this observation to our citizens. And along with that, I would be remiss if I didn't appreciate to Matt the job we do in our health department, our public health efforts here in the city. They're outstanding, and they're very much appreciated.
Mayor, thank you for your warm comments and your support of the health department. I would like to say that along the lines of appreciation, I note that during the course of the pandemic, Mayor, you never missed a single Board of Health meeting. You were at every meeting as our board president, and was very much appreciated. Speaking about appreciation, I really am proud of our department for all the things that we did during the course of the pandemic. I feel that it was an outstanding response, and I don't take credit for that. I give that credit to our community health division and to every member of our team who worked so hard. But we certainly would not have had the response that we had it not been for the support of this body. So to the members of the City Council, thank you all so much for your support, and of our city government who supported us during the course of Mr. Jones, Mr. Ewell, Your support was very much appreciated, very much needed, and pivotal. Mayor, I just cannot say how much we appreciated you during the pandemic, sir. As everyone knows, the emergency measures are ending in May. So next month, we will technically see the end of the emergency measures. On March 31st, last Friday, the Ohio Hospital Association indicated there were only 70 people in the entire Southwest region hospitalized with COVID. So the numbers are very low. And while we celebrate this end of the pandemic and these great numbers, we also remember the many people who have suffered during the course of this pandemic. But I think that the lives lost and the suffering in this community was lessened by the partnership across the culture of our city government, and also with the help of every city agency, the police department, the fire department, our Parks and Recreation Department, our Public Works Department, our Finance Department, our Building Department, Economic Development. It really was a team effort. So thank you all so much for every bit of support that you gave us. It's truly appreciated. Mayor, thank you so much for this award.
Thank you. All right, ordinances, resolutions. We have first off this evening, ordinance number 16, 2023. This is a second reading. So Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 16, 2023, an ordinance authorizing the sale, disposal, or transfer of personal property from the city of Springdale. Whereas the city of Springdale, the city seeks to sell, dispose, or transfer certain items of personal property for which it no longer has any municipal purpose and finds that it is not useful as such, absolutely or temporarily. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that the council of the city of Springdale council finds that the items of personal property identified in the attached Exhibit A have no municipal purpose and find that they are not useful as such, absolutely or temporarily, and it authorizes the sale, auction, disposal, salvage, or transfer of the items. Section 2, that this council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law.
All right, council, for the reading of ordinance 16, 2023, what is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Motion second, discussion? All right, seeing no lights, Ms. McNear, your poll council.
Mrs. Gantos?
Aye.
Mrs. Sullivan Weiscup?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance number 16, 2023 passes with 7 affirmative votes. Next up, we have ordinance number 18, 2023. This does have a public hearing attached to it. So, Ms. McNear, you want to do the reading?
Ordinance number 18, 2023, an ordinance approving a major modification to the Costco Plan Unit Development for the property located at 1100 East Kemper Road. Whereas the Council of the City of Springdale, Ohio, Council has previously approved the Costco Plan Unit Development PUD, and whereas the applicant has submitted an application for a major modification to the Costco PUD located at 1100 East Kemper Road, allowing for a modification to be made by Dish USA LLC to convert the property from retail space to add commercial operations for food processing and production related to its pretzel business. And whereas at its meeting of March 7th, 2023, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the proposed major modification. And whereas a public hearing was held by council on April 2023 pursuant to the requirements of the zoning code. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, the major modification to the Costco PUD associated with the modification of the property at 1100 East Kemper Road to add a commercial operations for food processing and production to the current retail use, which has been reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission in accordance with the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated herein by reference, is hereby approved, subject to the conditions of the Planning Commission, including A, staff, city engineering, and city planners' recommendations and consideration contained in their reports. As a PUD, this shall include staff, law director, and city approvals as covenants as necessary. B, all other zoning code regulations and conditions shall remain in effect. C, final development plan which shall be reviewed at a later date. Section 2, that this council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that the clerk of council finance director is hereby authorized and directed to notify the applicant of council's action. Section 4, that this ordinance shall be effective from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, council, we've heard the reading. At this point, we'll open a public hearing and invite anybody either for or against. And I understand we have presentation.
Thank you, Mr. President. The information I have presented up on the board includes the information provided to Planning Commission. And so I know it was all in your packets, and I know that some of the members have seen it already, but I just thought I would go over a little bit of the plan to convert the existing Costco building into a factory, a bakery, is that correct? No. Bakery. Essentially, on this drawing, the dark gray that you see here in this block is the existing Costco. The current plans is to add to the, this is the south side, this faces Kemper, add an addition here, add some chemical tanks here on the corner, tucked back off to the east, add an office space here in a future phase. In this blue is an addition for a freezer refrigerator, and the current initial addition, and this teal is a future phased addition. This project has loading docks facing, that would be west, and existing loading docks up to on the north side, which there's no changes. These are existing. The current fuel center, which is out here, will be demolished and removed. And there's an existing driveway access in this area that will be removed. You can see the dashed lines. So there's significant grading to try to, I don't want to say hide, but screen the loading docks. And I think significant effort has been made to keep the street appeal of this building in a very positive light. I think this presentation shows the building from Kemper very adequately. You've got the tanks off to the east that they're doing their best to screen all the mechanical equipment down below and on top. So there's the 2 levels of screening on these tanks. The front addition is this section here, which, I'll be honest, I look at this and I couldn't even tell it was still Costco. And then this is a future addition, and the refrigerators that are tall buildings off to the west. With that as a simple presentation, if there's any specific questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them. I know the developers here, if you have any questions for them, they can answer it as well.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I love that the pretzel business is expanding. Of German heritage, I'm a fan. I have one question about the perimeter of the property. So I know
Perimeter, I'm sorry?
the perimeter.
Yes, sir.
So when we at one point we had to make variances for the plant across the street, the meat processing plant, and they required extensive fencing after the fact. And they, at the time, it cited federal regulations for food processing. I'm not seeing that fencing here. It's a different set of regulations for bakery, I'm assuming, and we wouldn't expect a change later to add chain link fencing. And
Currently, this is the difference between this property and that property that you're speaking of is this is a planned unit development. So this would have to come in front of Planning Commission, number one. Number two, the final development plan might show fencing. I don't know if they're proposing it at all, but they still have to come in front of Planning Commission with a final development plan, which will show, I expect the plan to show that level of detail if they plan to have a fence or anything else. And then if it doesn't, and they have to add a fence later, like the meat processing plant had to, since it's a PUD, it'd have to come back in front of Planning Commission.
And I understand the process. The visual that you showed from Kemper looked very more appealing than you would expect for a large food processing or bakery. I just wanted to make sure that's what we should expect based on what we know
The
now.
current site they have right now does not have fencing around it.
Okay. I'm seeing people not in the background that are in the know. I assume the federal requirements wouldn't have changed. You would know that by now. All right, thank you.
Mr. Ramirez?
Thank you, Mr. President. Is the approval here dependent on whether or not they go forward with the purchase of the property? Looking at what they had in the inquiry, it led us to believe it wasn't a done deal yet.
So with all development projects, you end up with a purchase contract, and the purchase contract usually has covenants that they have to obtain approvals from different organizations. The city is one of those. So yes, it's dependent on the future sale, the closing. There are other issues that might happen, but this is a step along the way to have the project approved and then construction documents submitted. It's one of many steps, though, and any of those steps could trip it up, and they'd have to stop. So it's not the final. This is not a construction plan. This is a step along the way to develop a piece of property like this.
Thank you.
Mayor Webster?
Yes, I'd like for the developer to step forward for a minute. Could you talk about the number of jobs you're going to be creating here and what you have on Northland? Because the beautiful part about this development is they're not going to close their current facility on Northland. As a matter of fact, long-term wise, I guess that's hopefully going to expand also. But anyway, could you talk a little bit about the job growth and so forth?
With pleasure, Mr. Mayor, Mr. President. Yes, we're here with this major request to change a POD as a next step in the growth of Dietz USA. And just to take you back, Dietz started 2018 at Northland Boulevard with 7 employees. Today we have 161. The most come out of the area about 10 miles from this plant. With this new development, we're really expanding. We are not moving from Northland to this place, but we're just expanding our footprint significantly. In the first phase, we will have about 200 new jobs here, and it could go up to 300 plus, but this is the future development. But the first phase we are representing here in this chart here displayed is about 200, and out of this 200, we have a wide mix of entry-level workers, mid-level, up to engineering. This is an industrial bakery. This means we have high-tech lines in there. For the beginning, we start with 2 master big lines that produce about 12,000 pretzels an hour. So you can imagine how fast that goes. And you need a lot of engineering knowledge in there. So this is the plan here. Again, we present this as the growth and opportunity for the people here in the city. We like it. We want to stay here. And this is a one-off opportunity to go and stay. And this was one of our key decision points to find something very close to our existing plant, because we want to leverage our knowledge in this phase. And this plant is big enough to have up to 6 and even more lines. So you see the growth potential we can gain with this property.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any more lights from this stage. I'll open the floor if anybody likes to speak either for or against, since the public hearing is still in process. Second call. Third and final call. We'll close the public hearing. Council, this is a second reading and can be enacted upon this evening. What is your pleasure?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? All right, Ms. McNeil, you poll council.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf. Mrs. Ganthos. Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez.
Aye.
Mr. Vanover.
Aye. Ordinance number 18, 2023 passes with 7 affirmative votes. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have ordinance number 19, 2023. This is the first reading. Ms. McNeil, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 19, 2023, an ordinance amending section 95.03 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances governing illegal stormwater discharges and illicit connections to stormwater systems in the city of Springdale. Whereas the city of Springdale, the city's stormwater system must comply with National Pollutant Discharge Eliminating Systems permit process set up through Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. And whereas every 5 years, the EPA issues federal changes for the state of Ohio to make with regard to general permits, and the city must also comply with those changes. And whereas the city has previously adopted Section 95.03 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances relating to the regulation of stormwater discharges and illicit connections to the city's stormwater system. And whereas the city has been reviewing its stormwater management plan and seeks to amend Section 95.03 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances to meet current state and federal standards for stormwater design and to address state permit requirements for total maximum daily load discharges for stream runoff to improve our local watersheds. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, in an effort to meet the revised state and federal standard regarding stormwater management in the city of Springdale, Section 95.03 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances shall be amended as provided in the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that this council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that this ordinance shall be effective from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, council, have heard the reading of ordinance 19-2023. It is a first reading. Do you have any discussion this evening? Mr. Braun?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just for the benefit of members of council, Mr. Agricola worked on this along with a consultant for the city, and I wanted to let you know that this, along with the next two ordinances, are a package of regulations that relate to stormwater runoff, stormwater management, and illicit connections and overflows. These are required. We are required, when they come up with these updates, to essentially modify our code to address these. And that's what's been prepared for you. And I would tell you that I could answer your questions, but I really can't, because these are things that are essentially given to us from on high, and we have to implement them into our code in order to be in compliance. So what I will tell you is each of my communities that operate their stormwater districts and their plants have had to adopt these, and so they're all very similar, but what's been prepared for you in each section, each one addresses just a slightly different topic, and when I drafted the legislation, I tried to delineate between the three what they are. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other lights, so we'll see ordinance 19 again at our next meeting. Next up is ordinance number 2023. Likewise, as Mr. Braun outlined, this is part of a triple header, and it is a first reading. So Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 2023, an ordinance amending Chapter 150 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances governing stormwater and stormwater runoff management in the city of Springdale. Whereas the city of Springdale, the city's stormwater system must comply with National Pollutant Discharge Eliminating System permit process set up through Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. And whereas every 5 years, the EPA issues federal changes for the state of Ohio to make with regard to the general permits, and the city must also comply with those changes. And whereas the city has previously adopted Chapter 150 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances related to land development regulations in the city. And whereas the city has been reviewing its stormwater management plan and seeks to amend Chapter 150 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances to meet current state and federal standards for land development regulations as they relate to stormwater and stormwater runoff management in the city. Now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, in an effort to meet revised state and federal standards regarding land development regulations as they relate to stormwater and stormwater runoff management in the city of Springdale, Chapter 150 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances shall be amended as provided in the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that this council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that this ordinance shall be effective from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
Okay, council, for the reading of ordinance 2023, do we have any discussion this evening? 19. We'll see this again next meeting. And next up is ordinance number 21, 2023. Again, it's first reading, so Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 21, 2023, an ordinance amending Chapter 151 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances governing stormwater management in the city of Springdale. Whereas the city of Springdale, the city's storm sewer system must comply with the National Pollutant Discharge Eliminating System permit process set up through the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. And whereas every 5 years, the EPA issues federal changes for the state of Ohio to make with regard to the general permits, and the city must also comply with those changes. And whereas the city has previously adopted Chapter 151 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances related to the regulation of stormwater in the city. And whereas the city has been reviewing its stormwater management plan and seeks to amend Chapter 151 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances to meet current state and federal standards for stormwater management in the city. Now therefore be it ordained by the council, the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, in an effort to meet revised state and federal standards regarding stormwater management in the city of Springdale, Chapter 151 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances shall be amended as provided in the attached Exhibit A, which is incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, that this council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, that this ordinance shall be effective from and after the earliest period allowed by law.
All right, thank you, Ms. McNear. Council, for the reading of ordinance 21, 2023, do we have any discussion on this evening? All right, seeing no lights, we will revisit this again. All right, next up, we have ordinance number 22, 2023. It does include an emergency clause and can be enacted this evening. Ms. McNear, when you're ready.
Ordinance number 22, 2023, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement for the purchase of electricity for the city's electricity aggregation program and declaring an emergency. Whereas the voters in the city of Springdale, the city have previously authorized the city to aggregate eligible retail electric loads located within the governmental boundaries of the city and enter into service agreements for the sale and purchase of electricity, such as aggregation to occur automatically except where any person elects to opt out. And whereas in accordance with Chapter 4901 of the Ohio Administrative Code and Section 4928.08 of the Ohio Revised Code, the city is required to submit a certification application for electrical governmental aggregators to the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. And whereas the city has engaged in a fair and open process to request proposals for supplying electricity for the future from such certified electricity suppliers. And whereas to obtain the most competitive price, the process of entering into a contract for the supply of electricity requires the city to accept a proposal within hours after it is submitted, which requires a short time acceptance time for the city to enter into a contract to secure the best pricing. Now therefore be it ordained by the council, the city of Springdale, Ohio, members elected thereto concurring. Section 1, that the city administrator is hereby authorized to execute any and all contracts or related documents on behalf of the city and take such other steps as necessary for the purchase of electricity for city use from a retail electrical supplier in furtherance of the city's electric aggregation program if, 1, the electricity rate is based on the recommendation of Energy Alliances Incorporated, the city's consultant for its aggregation program, and 2, the electricity rate is for a period of at least 12 months and not to exceed a period of 36 months, and 3, the electricity rate is not to exceed 0.08 per kilowatt hour. Section 2, council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions relative to the passage of this legislation were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Section 3, this ordinance shall take effect on the earliest date allowed by law. Section 4, that this ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare, and shall, subject to the terms of Article 2D, 3D of the Charter, be effective immediately. The reason for said declaration of emergency is the need to execute an electric aggregation agreement as quickly as possible in order to secure the best rate for the city and its residents.
All right, council, for the reading of ordinance 22, 2023, what is your pleasure?
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. Our last contract, the last 3-year contract, had considerations and requirements for renewables at 100%. There's nothing in here about that. Is that going to be part of the consideration when you evaluate the contracts that come before you? The other part of it is this contract that we currently have is with Energy Harbor, which was implicated in the House Bill 6 scandal with the nuclear bailout. Is there going to be any consideration for corporate behavior when you evaluate these contracts?
Mr. Jones?
We obviously have or entered into an agreement with a different broker than what we had previously, but also we will be looking at their recommendations and how to proceed and how to move forward as far as rates and all that. So, we will be evaluating as much as we can with them and looking for their advice and guidance on how to move forward.
So renewable percentage and corporate behavior will be part of what you consider when you look at the contracts?
I apologize, I didn't hear that.
Renewable rates. So right now, renewable energy is part of the contract that's in our electric contract, that it's 100% renewable sourced energy to cover it. That's our last 3-year contract has had that. I just wanted to know if that's part of the consideration that you're going to use this time, since it wasn't included in the criteria that's in this ordinance.
I think that's accurate. Excuse me just a second. Yeah, again, we were just confirming that that will be part of what we deal with with our broker moving forward. Yes.
Well, and I just want to make sure people were proud of the fact that our last contract included that. It just wasn't in the consideration. I just wanted to make sure you heard that. And when you evaluate it, you look at that. If you look online as an individual right now for electric suppliers, there's options for an individual to get about 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour at a 30-year rate with no gotchas, no changing rates, no termination fees, opt-in, opt-out. So I would hope that our aggregate program would be able to better than an individual would be able to do on the market. The other question I have is, were you going to evaluate gas suppliers as well? In the last contract term 3 years ago, we could not find a more competitive rate as an aggregate than we could have as individuals, so the city didn't offer a gas aggregate supplier. Is gas aggregation being looked at again, or is that just off the table completely at renewal time?
It is being looked at as well.
Great. I'm glad it is. I would hope we could do better than individuals out there, so thank you.
Mr. Ramirez, you pull off table? Okay. Mayor Webster?
Yeah, what was the rate at the last contract 3 years ago? Now we're saying not to exceed 0.08 kilowatt per hour. Do you know what the not to exceed rate was in the last contract?
It's less than 4. It's less than 4 right now. It's 3.8.
Less than 4?
Yeah. Our current contract is amazing, but it started 3 years ago before all the spikes. It's less than 4, I believe. I think it's 3.8 if I remember right.
Buell?
Just on a side note, I had some general conversation today with our broker. Current rates today are hovering around 0.65 and 0.68. So, and those rates, the reason we brought this forward is because those rates are only good for a few hours. So you have to act on them very soon if the rates get to a certain point where they're worth jumping in on. But that was current day pricing as far as this morning was concerned, just to give you an idea. So things are going up. We unfortunately probably won't get close to what we have currently, but we're going to try and get that as low as possible with both brown and green energy.
Mr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is really just a question for clarification. I don't know if Mr. Anderson can answer it because I wasn't here 3 years ago. Are you saying that 3 years ago the renewable expectation was written into the ordinance, or it was an expectation that you wanted in the contract?
We actually had the contract last time.
We had it to vote on because there wasn't the time constraint that we have this time. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and the energy horizon has changed. There are fewer and fewer companies involved in generation, which is playing an effect on all of us. And then the other is transmission and distribution, which we're familiar with. Duke are heavily still in those. But the power generation, the numbers are dropping rapidly. And it's just, that's the horizon we're dealing with right now. All right, any further discussion? Mr. Jones?
I apologize, Mr. President. I just wanted to share that the Energy Alliance provided us with a listing of communities. Just a quick count. It looks like it exceeds about 50 plus, but I'd be happy to share that with anybody or pass it down, just some of the various different jurisdictions that are currently utilizing this broker.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. To be clear, I wasn't speaking of the contractor, the consultant we used last time when I was saying that they were involved in the House bill issues. I was talking about the actual energy supplier that the consultant recommended to us, Energy Harbors, was the one that we're buying energy from that's part of that issues that are rocking the Ohio State House. It's not the consultant that I had concerns with, it's who the consultants would be recommending. Since you'll be the one that, if this passes, be making that decision, I just wanted to make sure you had those thoughts in your mind when you look at the options, right? The renewable contract content and who it is that we're buying energy from as a community. The current contract reflects very well on Springdale up until Energy Harbor was implicated. So I just want to see if we can do better this time.
All right, I don't see any more lights. Ms. McNear, your poll council?
Mrs. Cantos? Aye. Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. Ordinance number 22, 2023 passes with 7 affirmative votes. And next up, we have, that's the end of our ordinances resolutions. We will move to old business. Is there any old business to bring before council this evening? New business? Ms. McNear?
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a couple of liquor license items. They are both, well, they're not really new liquor license or transfers. They are really stock ownership changes. The first one I have is for 11305 Princeton Pike, and that is for Dos Amigos. The second one is 11700 Princeton Pike, and that is for Mi Cozumel. My understanding is that they're owned by the same people, so these are, like I said, merely a stock ownership change. Do we have any issues with either of these items?
Council?
That will take care of filing the paperwork.
Okay.
We do have one question.
Mayor, or Mr. Ramirez?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. President. Will Mi Cozumel be moving? Will they need another change of address?
That it's not reflected here. I mean, my understanding is that everything in the mall has to move.
I think that one is Dos Amigos.
Right.
They own that also. Mi Cozumel and Dos Amigos are under same ownership, and that's the
Right,
two
right.
addresses you've got there.
Mr. Ramirez asked the question is, does Mi Cozumel have to move out of the mall?
I don't think anybody can answer that at this point. Well, I've heard so many theories on it. I wouldn't begin to answer that.
Okay,
Well, the question is, what we're approving is for the current location, correct?
right,
Right.
yeah.
If
Well, they're
they
not-
do move, will we have to come back and revisit this?
I would assume so, yes.
Well, this is just for a stock ownership change, so it's just a change of ownership. So it doesn't have anything to do with the physical location.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's still assigned to 11700 Princeton Pike, but they're just changing who owns it at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Braun?
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to reach out to council. I'm not one that can bind the city. However, I do give you advice, as you know, on a host of issues. However, tonight I was going to ask council to entertain the idea of passing a motion that would authorize me to commit the city as it relates to some of the opioid litigation settlements that are floating around. Similar to your aggregation programs where you have a very limited window to commit to those. I've spoken with Mr. Jones, but more importantly, both of our inboxes have spoken to us. We've been getting multiple emails over the last few weeks. I've got 6 potential opioid litigation settlements that have been proposed in the last few weeks, all of which are very similar. There's slight variations in each one of them. And obviously, there's recommendations that are coming down from everyone, from the Municipal League to the Attorney General's office on whether they think they're fair and reasonable. However, one of the reasons that I would ask for a motion tonight authorizing the law director to evaluate those settlements and at least commit the city to participate in them, ultimately you'll approve the final settlements and our payouts, and you'll have to create a fund to put those in, just like we did with the One Ohio settlements. They have a very narrow window at which time we can commit to being involved in those. And also there's multiples that are often very similar, and I think if you would authorize me and staff to evaluate those and at least initially commit us to those, we can be counted among the other communities that are going to participate. The reason that they do such a narrow window for time is because they usually are trying to determine how much money they're going to put forward with the settlement. And then your next question is going to be, well, how much money will we get, or how much have we been getting? Well, the answer to that is it varies based on the number of communities that are participating. And it also varies because some of these settlements include cities and villages, some include counties, townships, even school districts. And so I wanted to let you know that. John's indicating here that, one of them right now, we have an April 18th deadline to get us in on, for instance. And that involved multiple parties. So all I'm seeking tonight is, because I never act independent of council, I simply advise you, I'm asking you to give me the authority to evaluate these along with city staff and make an initial determination on whether the city will participate, understanding that ultimately they'll be approved by council.
Mr. Hawkins?
Do you need a formal motion, or are you just looking for acquiescence or dissent?
I would like to do a verbal motion just so I have authority, because I contract with you, I don't have the ability to bind the city unless you give me that authority. Again, the understanding is that ultimately you'll be approving the final settlements. I just don't like to act on my own.
I move to allow Mr. Brown, the administration, to be able to review and evaluate the potential opioid settlements. Is that sufficient?
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. We're just talking about for opioid-related settlements. This wouldn't give you anything beyond that. It's just for this topic.
That's correct. And so far, we've seen these against, just the most recent ones include both distributors and manufacturers. There's Teva, Allegren, CVS, Walgreens, Walmart have all been floated around. There have been a couple others that have circulated against some of the manufacturers. But yeah, that's just opioid.
Thank you.
Okay, don't see any more lights. Ms. McNear, poll council on the authorization.
Mr. Hawkins?
Aye.
Mrs. Sullivan Weisskopf?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gantos? Aye. Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Ramirez?
Aye.
Mr. Vanover?
Aye. You have your directive. All right. Still in old business? New business? All right, meetings and announcements. Mr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Springdale Board of Health will meet on the 13th of April, adjacent to these chambers.
Ms. Weisskopf?
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning Commission will meet on April 11th in these chambers at 7 p.m.
Mr. Yule?
Thank you, Mr. President. Civil Service will meet tomorrow, Thursday, April the 6th at 2 p.m. in the council conference room.
Mr. Jones?
I, too, would like to say thank you, Mr. President. A couple announcements from Mr. Wilson, our Director of Parks and Rec. Shred Day Reminder, Saturday, April 8th, 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at the Springdale Community Center parking lot. JC's Easter Egg Hunt, Saturday, April 8th at noon at Ross Park. Need to be 10 and under to participate. The community center will be closed on Sunday, April 9th in observance of Easter. And then Arbor Day ceremony schedule is the 28th of April, and it'll be at Heritage Hill Elementary at 9:30 and Springdale Elementary at 2:30. Thank you.
Still in meetings and announcements? All right. At this point, I open the floor for communications from the audience. Is there anybody in the audience like to address council? Second call. Third and final call. We'll close communications from the audience. Mr. Hawkins, we'll go to you on an update on legislation still in development.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you review your internal memorandums, item number 1 was addressed with ordinance number 18-2023, an ordinance approving a major modification to the Costco Plan Unit Development for the property located at 1100 East Kemper Road, and that passed the 7-0 vote. Item number 2 is addressed with ordinance number 16-2023, an ordinance authorizing the sale, disposal, or transfer of personal property from the city of Springdale, and that passed the 7-0 vote. Item number 3 was addressed with ordinance number 22-2023, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement for the purchase of electricity for the city's electricity aggregation program and declaring an emergency, and that passed the 7-0 vote. Item number 4 was addressing ordinances number 19-2023, 20-2023, and 21-2023, 3 separate ordinances amending Chapter 95.03, Chapter 150, and Chapter 151 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances related to stormwater regulations, and that was a first reading. Item number 5 is forthcoming.
Okay, and staying with Mr. Hawkins, an update on legislation still in development.
We will have another reading for ordinances number 19-2023, 2023, and 21-23, 3 separate ordinances regarding the amending of chapters 95.03, chapter 150, and chapter 151 of the Springdale Code of Ordinances regarding stormwater regulations. And we will also have a resolution authorizing the city administrator to file an application with the Southwest Ohio Regional Transit Authority for transit infrastructure funds related to the Northland Boulevard reconstruction project, and authorizing the mayor and clerk of council finance director to execute all contracts and other documents related to that project. And that's it, unless there's anything else from council or the administration.
Administration, we good? Okay. Well, with that, before we move to item 14A, I would just like to wish everybody out in Springdale a blessed Passover season and a blessed Easter coming up. And with that, we have item 14 before us.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Council's adjourned.